This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry with agriculture broadcasters Orion Samuelson and Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH and your local Case IH dealer.
This past week saw a couple of closely watched reports from the USDA, and agricultural carbon markets had a watershed moment. Hello folks, welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson in the studio this week, and we'll be checking in with Max Armstrong here in a minute. This past week saw a lot of news in agriculture, not least of which was on Wednesday morning when Indigo Ag held a press conference announcing for the first time large-scale carbon credits sold into agriculture. Joining me now to talk about it is Chris Harbert. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at Indigo Ag. Chris, talk to me about this announcement on Wednesday. What does it signify?
It's a signification of just a change in agriculture, an opportunity for us to bring a market of carbon credits to farmers in the U.S., corn, soy, cotton, and wheat farmers across the country.
Now, we've been talking about carbon markets for several years. They've been growing in prominence in agriculture. What makes Wednesday's announcement so key for the carbon market space?
Well, the key for it, underpinning all this, of course, is a new market. It's the dollars that can come from it. And that's driven directly by the rigor and the confidence that everyone has, the buyers and the producers, that this carbon credit, this invisible gas that we're pulling out of the atmosphere and sequestering in the soil, that it's real, that it's additional, that it's going to be permanent. All those criteria are met. And that's what the program, that milestone just happened last week, was about.
So how does this program work? I'm a farmer and I want to put some acreage into a sequestration program. How does the next step take place? How do you get those credits to become real?
So the choice, once the growers decided I'm in it, I'm ready to do this, we collect the data and information from the farmer, all the different major events. When did they plant? When did they harvest? What were the yields? Any tillage events? Any cover crop planting? The new thing that they've done, the change. We record all that, combine that, put that into a large report, submit it to the registry. It's externally verified and validated, meets all the standards of what the buyers are looking for, and we make sure that drives the highest prices possible.
Well, let's talk prices, because that is a key component to getting farmers fired up about this. How have prices for carbon credits changed recently?
Well, we started 2 years ago in this, putting prices out there, trying to match buyers and producers of the carbon credits. We started at $20, we raised to $27. And we went to 40 here recently, and we're selling actively at 40. So the price has more than doubled in the course of us just getting this market going.
So now that it's going, now that you've got cash paid out, you've got confidence in this system, what are the next steps for growers?
So the next steps are rinse and repeat. This is an annual program. Every year, just like it's a carbon harvest, just like your primary harvest, those growers who started out get to enroll again and get the payments coming again. And we're looking for more growers to get in, sign up, grow the program. The larger the program gets, actually the more confidence we have in the overall outcomes and the more money everyone makes out of this.
So how many farmers received payments from this first tranche, and what's enrollment look like today?
So the first group was 175 farmers, made it through with any number of fields that they were involved in and willing to do the practice changes on. We're seeing that, and in the second crop here that we're actively in the process of finishing, more than doubling.
Wow, wow. So as folks are curious about this, they're wondering how we can plug this into their operation. Chris, where can they go with Indigo? What sort of resources are available for folks just beginning this exploration into carbon sequestration?
There's a number of ways. Either directly with Indigo, we have a class, actually a legitimate carbon college, we call it. You can go on the Indigo website, find Carbon College, learn more about carbon generally. We work with partners, so some of our partners, Corteva, Growmark, Landis Cooperative, these are groups who are already in a relationship with farmers. They can actively connect with the farmers, and you can work with them to get part of the program.
That is fantastic. This continues to grow. Folks, that was Chris Harbert, the Chief Strategy Officer at Indigo Ag. And Max, I understand you had the chance to catch up with an old friend recently.
Mike, have you spent any time around bees? Have you been out to see a beekeeper? Well, I made such a stop the other day. I went out to see my friend Ron Fisher, who is retired from an investment banking firm in Chicago, where, as a full-time job, they were dealing with municipal bonds. But Ron these days is a long ways away from that, not far from the Mississippi River as it divides Illinois and Iowa. That's where he has his hives. And he was out there smoking the hives so I could get a good up-close look at his bees and the honey. Here are some interesting stats about beekeeping maybe you didn't know. There are 2.7 million managed honeybee colonies in the United States. 1 out of 5 of those is in North Dakota. North and South Dakota, Montana, and Minnesota account for almost half of all the U.S. honey produced each year. Many beekeepers produce honey during the summer in the northern plains, the northern states there, where the bees forage on pastures and rangelands, harvesting what honey the bees do not consume or stow away to nourish their young. And then the bees are trucked to California for the pollination that takes place there. And many of those hives, of course, are out there for the almond growers. They account for about 80% of the global almond production, and they require about 2.5 million colonies of bees. So there's a lot that goes on out there by all means. And then there are the hobbyists, like my friend Ron Fisher, who's been a beekeeper since he was a very young man. He said he got interested when he was a teenager. And Mike, he offered me the opportunity to put on the hood and go help him there. I passed on that. Maybe we'll let you do that on a future occasion.
Well, Max, I do have a taste for honey, but I think I might have to put in for some hazard pay if I'm going to be reaching in and trying to fish it out from the bees. Thank you for that story. Those honeybees contribute a lot to American agriculture. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. And now it's time to talk markets. This past week saw 2 much anticipated reports from the USDA. Joining me here to help break them down is Dan Huber, author of the Huber Report. And Dan, let's talk acreage right off the bat. The trade was watching closely. Were there any surprises on Thursday's report to your mind?
The only real surprise came in soybeans, almost a 3 million acre reduction from the March estimates, so that was definitely a shocker. Corn, a little bit higher than trade estimates, but negligible. I mean, we were anticipating something a little bit better, great planting weather through the I-states when it finally did come about. The question mark, though, was, what's going to happen up in the Dakotas, northern Minnesota, those areas, and obviously they just could not get the beans up there and really had very few other places to move at that point. So interesting enough, that acreage number really takes us back to where the trade was really thinking soybean acreage was going to be prior to the March 29th or March 30th intentions report. So we're kind of back to square one, really, on the bean acreage.
Right back to square one. And with regard to acreage, you mentioned the tough planting conditions up in the Dakotas and in Minnesota. Oh, are they going to see a resurvey for this study, or is it done?
I've not heard discussion of a resurvey. I mean, what, of course, people will be looking at will be the prevented planting numbers when they're issued by the USDA here soon. So it's, and again, I don't know the exact date when that comes out, but I think that's going to be the general assumption. Is it went to maybe some more crops back into conservation reserve, but certainly some prevented planting claims that are going to be bigger than normal. So.
Yeah, certainly talked to some friends up in the Dakotas, and they are planning on some PP this year.
Absolutely.
Dan, the acreage drop in soybeans back down to that 88 million number. How much does this change the balance sheet for traders?
Well, not significantly. Granted, we're not looking at a what you would call a critical situation on what the projected ending stocks are in soybeans. Not overburdensome by any stretch of the imagination. So a lot of it now is going to fall back to yield. Are we going to look at above trend line yields or not? So the yield could kind of compensate for it here at this point in time. When it comes over to corn, at $1.4 billion was projected this next year. That's by no means a burdensome amount of corn, but all of these things have been kneaded into the dough already. So it's not anything that's going to be terribly stunning, or I don't think long term, unless we turn around and have a weather scenario show up that's going to excite things. And right now, there's always going to be trouble spots out there, but for the most part, that outlook looks pretty decent here as we move into the pollination period. So.
It is. We're getting close, Dan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We also had on Thursday USDA's quarterly grain stocks estimates come out, and again, the trade likes to keep a watch on those, see how this appearance is going in the countryside, and were there any surprises?
No, all corn, beans, wheat, all three were just a little bit higher than the average trade estimates, fell well within the range, but and again, when you have high prices like this, the livestock sector is going to do everything they can to economize, not use any excess or waste anything when it comes to feed. And as of late, we have certainly seen a pretty dramatic drop-off in the export sales. Shipments have still moved along pretty well, but right now when you look at the numbers year to date, we're probably not going to meet the projections the USDA had. for exports this year. So, I mean, all those things are starting to add into that mix as well.
They are. Dan, this past week, exports, anything to write home about?
Oh, the exports themselves were fine. Export sales were just disastrous, though. I mean, the corn combined old and new crop didn't even amount to 9 million bushels. I think 8.7 million bushels, lowest for the sales for the year for the current crop year. Soybeans went negative with cancellations. And even the new crop sales were very disappointing. It was almost a wash week when you combine the two. So.
All right. Well, we'll talk more commodity markets with Dan Huber when we return. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn about this history and tire solutions for today. Welcome back, folks. We're talking markets with Dan Huber of the Huber Report. And Dan, that last segment, you mentioned at the end that exports have been disappointing.
Right.
I'm curious, strength of the dollar, has that been a factor in limiting our exports?
Oh, no doubt it has to be coming into the play. I mean, the dollar is pushed up. I think if we close where we were trading at this morning, this will be the highest monthly close in over 20 years. Certainly has to be creating an impact, particularly when you have competing products available from South America, some from Europe, and of course, I mean, here you've got Russia now estimated this morning they're probably going to produce a record wheat crop this year. Maybe some restrictions on where that wheat goes, but that just opens some other doors for us. But again, the U.S. of course has been relegated to a second, third tier player when it comes to the wheat world market. Maybe a little bit more so in the last year, and we have done a great job of winding down our wheat inventories here, but still at 620, 630 million. Again, not a terribly critical situation as long as we don't encounter some kind of a major crop issue somewhere else in the world.
Right. And well, as we're talking about the wheat market, Dan, there was a lot of conversation early this spring about spring wheat acres. They're in the heart of that wet country up in the Red River Valley. Yep, exactly. Of course, we did get an acreage number from the USDA. Does the trade believe it?
I don't think they're really going to discount it. There was plenty of economic incentive there to plant to the very last moment, and I think farmers probably took up that mantle and did what they could. So, and again, the increase or the numbers that came in were a little bit above trade estimates. Not like the soybeans where it was a huge variation. So, I think there's probably no real reason to necessarily disbelieve that number at this point.
All right. Dan, you mentioned in that first segment that livestock cattle feeders are doing everything they can to economize on their corn usage. I imagine a similar story is playing out in the ethanol world. Where do you sense ethanol demand going this summer?
Well, same situation. Now, granted, on one side of the coin, you have the world energy markets in disarray just because of what did happen with Russia and Ukraine at this point. But, higher prices tend to restrict usage. Now, granted, ethanol is probably confronting the same issue that livestock feeders right now. That's availability of near-term supplies. But, when people encounter that, they look for alternative sources. I think in travel, the numbers are still coming in for the summer months here, but I'm sure people are probably looking at ways to cut that back. So I think the usage overall could turn out to be disappointing here as we move through the summer months, at least compared to normal years.
Right. So if we're losing demand in livestock and in ethanol and perhaps on the export side, Dan, should we be aggressive about getting some of that December corn contract marketed?
Oh, I think so. And again, we've had a pretty solid break here over the last 4 to 5 weeks. We've probably overdone it to the downside at this point in time. A lot of times we look at the late June to early July period for highs in the market, but you can look back over historically and we found oftentimes reaction lows. I mean, not major moves higher, but I wouldn't be surprised to see us rebound from here. But again, I don't think we're moving into a new bull market. It's just going to be opportunities for producers to sell into it and lock in some still what are very, very solid prices.
They certainly are. Would you have a similar advice for folks in the soybean market?
Oh, I think so. The bean market, and again, you really look at the last 5 months in the beans, we've gone nowhere. It's been a very large trading range. I mean, far larger than we've grown accustomed to. But yes, I think you still want to be in the sell the rally mentality.
Sell the rally. Great piece of advice from Dan Huber of the Huber Report. Dan, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
Welding is a vital skill for a lot of folks involved in agriculture. And of course, in the summertime, when something breaks, perhaps some hay equipment, you got to get out there, do a little bit of welding. You're often doing it in the dust and in the heat of summer. Well, Chad Colby has an update for us. Maybe you don't have to weld in the heat anymore.
Do you like to weld? I know when I was a young man, my father taught me how to weld, and I remember the first time I bought one of those fancy welding helmets. You know the type that auto-synths the light. My dad, I think, thought I was crazy to spend that kind of money. Now, it's commonplace, as we all know, but there's been some pretty intense enhancements in that technology, and I got a first-hand example of that, and I wanted to share it with you this week on our tech segment. At a recent visit to TCI Manufacturing in Walnut, Illinois, I was talking with their team, and TCI Manufacturing specializes in building high-end equipment in the aggregate industry, like this feeder stacker you see right here. And one thing's consistent about a product like this: there's a lot of welding. And when I talked to Patrick Reaver, the president of TCI Manufacturing, he showed me some of the new technology they got, and one of them is this new helmet from Miller. Here it is on my head, and the cool part about it is it's got its built-in ventilation system. It's got all the technology you need as far as to protect your eyes. The visor actually flips up also and has a clear lens. Anytime you get new technology, there's some really strong enhancements. And with this system, it's the ventilation. Obviously, it's got great protection around your face and eyes. Helmets have had that for years, but the ventilation is really the key here. That pack on the back has a built-in HEPA filter. They recommend changing it about every 30 days or so. As I commented with these operators, they both shared with me it was a lot more pleasant experience when you're welding all day, simply because you got some nice fresh air pumped inside these helmets. They also like how convenient it was to use that flip-up visor. You didn't have to take the helmet on and off your head. You're looking about 4 or 5 times the cost of a regular helmet, and if you weld a lot, it's definitely worth it. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. It's incredible to see how technology can improve the quality of life, even in something as old-fashioned as welding. Just keeps getting better. And that improvement in technology is being spotlighted by a new show called Farm Next. We'll talk about that later on in this episode.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Every few weeks, we like to go to the field to talk to a farm broadcast friend, because they know what's happening in their region, and that allows us to get a better feel for what's going on in that area's agriculture. Joe Gill is one of our favorites, KASM Radio, Albany, Minnesota. Joe, as you take a look at what's going on around you right now, what's happening in the field out there? Some haying operations, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's been interesting here. June, just a few days remaining. First crop alfalfa is pretty much in the books. It's been a weird June for weather. It's either feast or famine when it comes to rainfall. We've seen some areas get showers that at the end of the day accumulate up to 5, 6, 7 inches of rain at one time. It's just so odd. And then you go a few miles down the road, they got 3 drops. So it's really been an interesting summer, interesting June. First crop alfalfa done, as I mentioned, but a big issue has been bugs this year. Some of those small weevils have been a big issue for a lot of folks.
Are there quite a few dairy operations around you yet in that area around Albany, Minnesota?
Yes, there is, Max. Stearns County is still the biggest dairy county here in the state. So dairy is pretty much the primary egg industry you see here, and they range anywhere from 30 cows to 3,000 cows and even more. During
June, Dairy Month, in many counties there are Dairy Month activities. Was that the case this year in Stearns County?
Yeah, if you went hungry and didn't get a free ice cream cone or a free dilly bar, it was your own fault. A lot of activity. There's a lot of promotion. I know in Stearns County, our surrounding counties too, we have a lot of dairy princesses who take an active role and promote the dairy industry and our dairy farmers, because it all culminates in August for our Princess Cave, the Milky Way. So we see a lot of these young women do a great job in advocating for dairy. And some counties do a breakfast on the farm or a supper on the farm as well to bring some more recognition to our dairy industry.
I noticed in a commentary the other day, the economists of Rabobank were saying maybe the highest milk price, producer milk price for the year is behind us in the second quarter that has taken place. Producers clearly must be worried about that milk price at all times with the kind of costs they are facing, one could assume.
You know, that's the big caveat, Max. That's a great point because we saw some of these milk futures, $27, $28. And I talked to my dad. He's in his early 80s, and he said, Joe, I've never seen a milk price that high before. And you see the price, you're saying, wow, farmers should be making some ground, but it all comes back to the inputs. They have not relaxed at all. They're still very strong and high. So a price like that is needed at this time.
I bet your dad's hands, being involved in the dairy industry, I bet his hands are like ball gloves, aren't they?
Pretty much. It's interesting. He shakes his head because, you know, when he started as a kid, they worked a lot of fields with horses. So to see things that are working with today's technology is really mind-blowing.
When you shake hands with a dairyman or a dairywoman, you get that feel immediately. You know that those hands have seen a lot of hard work. And it's tough on the knees, too. Historically has been, hasn't it?
It is. Most of them have one, if not two, knee replacements by now, and he's on his first one already. So,
those automatic milkers have made it possible for a generation to come back, those who want to be able to take a vacation. What about labor needs, though, not just for the dairy industry, but other operations around you? Is it a struggle?
It is a big struggle, Max. It's short. I think when I grew up, it was like you'd have a couple neighbor kids that would be willing to help out. Now, necessarily, that isn't the case. And to find somebody to be also tech savvy, because as you mentioned, some of the robotics they have in dairy, it's not just here's a pitchfork or here's a pair of gloves and go to work. There is some technology involved as well. So you just can't, you know, grab a warm body necessarily to fill that position. But it is an issue on a small farm, on a large farm. If you're a high schooler that wants to milk cows or do anything ag related, there's almost a fight to get their services because a lot of people could use one or two hands on a farm, that's for sure.
As a friend of mine said a couple of years ago, long gone, Max, are the days when you could go up to the pool hall and get a couple of kids to help you take up hay. You can't do that anymore.
Yep, that's a hard fight. That's a hard fight, that's for sure.
Fair season just ahead. Quickly here in the final half minute or so, will there be a lot of county fairs going on there before long around you?
I think the county fairs are going to be going on as normal. We're going to see as normal of a summer and county fair season than we have seen in a long time. The one big question is poultry, because right now, even at our local sales barns, we have some that have an exotic sale, they call it, every month, that'll feature some of our poultry and birds. They're unable to do that yet. So it's going to be interesting to see how this is going to progress and if they will be available to attend the fair.
Our county fairs are so dependent upon volunteers, people stepping up to the plate the year round in some instances to maintain facilities there. Are you seeing that yet around you?
Oh yeah, volunteers, they play a vital role. And in another sector that plays a role is the parents. I mean, right. My kids, unfortunately, not in 4-H, but that's a dedication. That's a different brand and at a different level. Yeah.
For sure. Joe, thanks so much. Great to talk to you. We appreciate the expertise you share here.
Thanks, Mac. Have a good week.
Joe Gill, KASM Radio, joe@mycasm.com is his email. There's more coming up on This Week in Agribusiness. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. It's hard to believe, but summer is nearly half over, which means we are getting very close to the end of August and the beginning of Farm Progress Show 2022. I know Max recently caught up with Matt Youngman about new changes to the Farm Progress Show grounds. Max?
Yeah, Mike, when I peeled away June on the calendar, I realized we are not many weeks away from the 2022 Farm Progress Show in Iowa. I thought we'd visit with Matt Youngman about that. He oversees the show and can update us on what's going on in preparation for a show that hasn't been held there in 4 years in the live event, correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's exciting. The industry has changed a lot since 2018, and we're really excited to be back in Boone, kind of having to knock off the rust. But you know, as we turn the calendar, like you say, over to July, you realize that Farm Progress Show is next month. It's at the end of next month, but the energy and the excitement is really starting to pick up.
As I recall, the corn was planted there in a timely manner. It can't be too many days away from pollination, could it?
Yeah, it's growing fast. You know, Central Iowa had a little bit of a rough spring, and that corn, while everybody was ready to go except Mother Nature at the end of April, we didn't get that in until middle of May. So it's running a little bit behind, but we have been getting good heat units to get that caught up. And you know, it might be a little bit wet, but we do look forward to good field demonstrations at this year's show.
That heat has made a difference, hasn't it, in so many fields, as growers have shared with us. And then if they got a shot of moisture, it really brought it along.
Yeah, that rain last weekend, you know, that really helped things along a lot. You know, you want that corn. I'm tracking the weather in Boone every day, and every day that it hits 85 degrees is a good day because we're getting maximum heat units and cranking that corn along. You know, we're growing 78-day corn there in Central Iowa, so it doesn't get overly tall, and once it tassels, it really matures quickly.
At the show last year at Decatur, Illinois, there was a concert that folks really enjoyed out on a very nice summer evening. Will there be another one of those?
There will be, and we have never been able to do that in Boone before, so we're really excited to bring a concert right there to the showgrounds Wednesday afternoon. You know, right at the close of the show on Wednesday, we're going to have a free concert. Anybody who has paid to come to the show, the concert will be included in that. No additional ticketing or anything like that, just a great evening. And we had a great event last year, and we're working to replicate that for this year and put that inside the fence. You know, not being there since 2018 and being able to bring some new things like the concert to the Boone show site is really exciting to be a part of.
I was hearing about the floating tractor. For folks who aren't familiar with that, share what that is.
Yeah, we did that at Mitas Trelleborg. Has a really cool display. They've got a tractor set up it actually has enough tire on it to where it creates flotation. And we have a pond there right on the edge of the show site, a retention pond as part of the drainage system. And they floated that in 2018 and looking forward to bringing that back in 2020. Max, I can tell you, I was fortunate enough, or maybe, you know, brave enough to jump into the cab of that tractor and drive it out onto a pond in 2018. And it's quite an experience to watch that water come up, right up almost to the doors of the tractor before it actually floats. It's kind of a strange feeling, I'll tell you.
I can imagine you'd guide folks to the website now to make plans to attend. That's August 30th, 31st, and September 1st, right?
That's exactly right. Everything you're going to want to know as we finalize plans on the concert and make other announcements, all that information will be at farmprogressshow.com. But you know, the important thing is, like you say, mark the dates: August 30, 31, and September 1st. Lots of things are in motion. We're going to have a new and improved traffic flow into the show with some support from the Iowa Department of Transportation. They're doing a great job of upgrading the roads there around the show site. Really excited about what we have in store for folks.
Matt Youngman, thank you. We'll check back with you or some of your team members in just a few days to get an update on Farm Progress Show 2022.
Thank you, Max.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, it's time to turn our focus to the weather, and stalwart ag meteorologist Greg Solier doesn't join me this week in the studio. He joins me from the beach. Greg, tell me, where are you and what are you watching on the weather front this next week?
Right here at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. To the north is Kill Devil Hills, where they actually did the flight, Orville and family. And here's where they sent the message that they made it into the air and over my shoulder, southern shores. It's been cold here in North Carolina. The heat's on now. And matter of fact, let's take a look at the Pacific Northwest, where there is cool and cold air in sight. And note this sizable upper trough as the week wears on. It's been teasing us back and forth And we've been talking about significant moisture and as the weeks have worn on into the summertime season in the Pacific Northwest. Note the series of frontal boundaries on the move. Most of that moisture is lined up from the Cascades on westward. Even some late season snowfall. The storms turn heavy and severe from the Black Hills to the east and southeast later on into the week. As we take a look at that mid to late week, that the time frame is conducive of upper troughiness, U-shaped configuration to the jet stream winds. A couple of more systems coming ashore, limited warmth, lots of moisture in store. And we've seen that with streams and rivers of late, and the storms that turn heavy and severe from the western Dakotas. They'll slide east-southeast on that warm front. An active weather pattern. They need the moisture as well across South Dakota, not into the Red River Valley of the north. As we take a look at the southwestern states, the monsoon season has kind of eased on up a little bit, but is still underway in spotty fashion. Note that tropical green low down through Baja that will ultimately begin to feed moisture. You'll see that middle to late portions of the week. Still a broad southwest to northeast upper flow, a hot ridge over the southwestern part of the country. Still able with that little tropical low in the desert southwest to generate downpour producing shower and thunderstorm activity. Note the heat, Mike, still Nebraska on southward in through Texas. That corridor, despite the completion of winter wheat harvest, is still in need of moisture. Topsoil is short and very short by some 90%.
Well, Greg, that heat certainly encouraged crop conditions to grow across the Corn Belt. Do you see that continuing into this next week?
We do, especially where soil moisture is in the inadequate stage. Of course, we're keeping an eye on that drought monitor. Of course, it's had a bullseye area of abnormally dry to drought-ridden central Illinois and Indiana, still lingering parts of Wisconsin, northern Illinois, parts of the western Corn Belt. Onto the maps and charts for the western Corn Belt. Note the complexity of frontal boundaries on the move and the jet stream winds gliding them along it with daytime heating, Gulf moisture, outflow boundaries, whatever the slightest mechanism will be off to the races with these late night, early morning, late afternoon, early evening outbreaks of thunderstorm activity. And yeah, despite the July calendar date, note the middle to late portions of the week, they are still heavy and severe, running from Black Hills to the Corn Palace, southeast to the parts of Illinois. So some of those key drought-ridden areas will get recharged, may come down all at once, complete with severe weather. Onto the southern plains, as mentioned, a winter wheat harvest is just about over with, if not complete. And we're keeping an eye on Texas for additional moisture. Note that tropical low, Big Bend area of Texas. Daytime heating is going to be a tough one on man and beef. Oklahoma, northern Texas, triple-digit readings there. Desert Southwest is still loaded up with moisture, scattered showers and thunderstorms. We anticipate that little tropical disturbance is increased rainfall prospects, improved soil moisture in through Texas, the heat and humidity, and more storms too. As far north is just about the Missouri Boot Hill and points on westward later on into the week.
Greg, take us through the eastern Corn Belt to the East Coast. What are they going to get this next week?
There is rain on the way each and every day. You may not necessarily like the coverages. They may be perhaps too much in the way of downpour producing activity. Severe weather is into play as well, but cumulatively speaking, nice amounts are expected. Note the heat and humidity all the way up into the central and southern Corn Belt, triple digit southwest of the Ozarks. The downpours, again, could be heavy and severe, and the moisture is still needed in the areas of the Northeast and New England. Little change in the maps and charts late in the week. Cooler up towards the Sioux. Heat and humidity at the Ohio and South area between. No shortage of showers and thunderstorms. Into the southeastern states we go, and note another tropical system, western Gulf, off of Florida as well. The showers and thunderstorms will be scattered, especially in the late night, early morning hours, and in the afternoon as well. Both early in the week and by late in the week, keep an eye on the tropics. It's going to be a busy one this tropical weather season.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
And we're talking weather with Greg Solier, who is down on the beach in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Greg, looking out to this week ahead, we had a lot of fireworks this weekend to celebrate the 4th of July. Is Mother Nature going to provide any fireworks in the form of precipitation next week?
Absolutely. She's got it going probably over many areas with time this holiday weekend, kind of the at least the Mother Nature's version of pyrotechnics, and they will extend into next week. We are bullish on rainfall, ladies and gentlemen. Here it is, the precipitation, the rainfall for the week to come, centered through the upper Midwest, northern Corn Belt, at least an inch or two there. Heaviest corridor could be over still some of the driest reaches of southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and a second area that will, with time this week, generate an inch or two, maybe as far south as the drier areas of central Illinois and Indiana. Eastern fringes of the plains at an inch or two. Note the tropical systems down through Texas, off of Florida. Don't think they'll be named, but they will be moisture sources. And there's indications that some of those will work northward into the Ohio Valley in the next 10 days to 2 weeks. Monsoon moisture southwest, fair coverage of half inch, maybe locally higher into the Pacific Northwest there, Mike.
Well, Greg, I know a lot of farmers would love to see that rainfall develop, but I'm curious what temperatures look like here in the week of July 11th.
And those temperatures are certainly going to be conducive and certainly positive to help it to generate this rainfall. Here are the temps because those warm readings and high dew points with daytime heating or disturbances will generate the shower and thunderstorm activity. And it's a west to east upper flow, readings a few degrees above average from the Sioux back into the desert southwest and west Texas, a little bit below average with tropical moisture and clouds in the southeast and into the Pacific Northwest as well. Look at this moisture scene. The frontal boundaries are stuck underneath that jet stream. They can't move north or south significantly. Disturbances track along it, and hence the above average rainfall for the Dakotas, Pacific Northwest, much of the Corn Belt in the Ohio Valley. Could be almost too much of a good thing with more severe weather potential. And the tropics remain busy, and they extend northward out of Texas through the Delta and the southeastern states as the week wears on.
Well, Greg, what about the week of July 18th? What do you see?
A little corridor of that hot ridge beginning to reestablish itself, but a small area. Here it is, centered on the Dakotas, back into the Central Rockies. Yeah, near 100 there. That's some of the worst topsoil moisture issues, lack thereof, in through Nebraska. The cooling, if you will, attributed to tropical moisture in the monsoon setup, desert southwest, Gulf Coast, into the northeast of New England. Much of the remainder of the Corn Belt is above average. We do get some dry time back into play under that hot ridge over the Great Plains, but the monsoon kicks back in. Still wet over the Ohio Valley, eastern through northern Corn Belt, up towards the Canadian border. And despite being mid to late July, keep an eye on hail and high wind prospects as well across the upper Midwest.
All right, Greg, take us to the end of July. What develops?
Well, of course, we've got lots of issues going on in the back 40, tasseling, pollinating, silking corn. Those beans are going to need more rain. And first, from a temperature standpoint, nothing too out of control. No hot ridge. Warmth, yeah, from the St. Lawrence River Valley through the bunch of the Corn Belt locales of the Midwest and southward into Oklahoma and Texas. Normal temps southeast and the southwest. Little troughiness into the high plains areas into the Pacific Northwest. Well, you get that trough even despite the late July setting here there. Mike, look at the maps and charts for the middle and late parts. The last week of July, it is wet and stormy. Great Plains, much of the Corn Belt to the Ohio Valley. The tropics are going to be busy in the southeastern states across the Atlantic. Back to dry time in the southwest.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
We often see this ahead of a major tractor show. Someone is working hard in their shop to try to get that tractor ready in time. Well, in this case, I think it's two tractors, and I believe they are connected. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. On every store lock, there's a tag that says Made in the USA. They sure are. StoreLock.com is where you get more information on that. Well, I don't know if Jeff Lanou has come up with a name for this tractor, for these tractors conjoined, but I bet there will be some kind of a name. Take a look at what he's doing here. It's not just one John Deere G, but two hooked up together, to pull together, to plow together, Jeff told me. Maybe that's a double down Deere, or call it a double dare-ya Deere. The styled G that'll be out on the front end was made in 1952. The unstyled one is a 1938 G. He's had the 52 G on a dyno, he told me, cranking out 60 horses. And he thinks he might be able to get 40 out of the older one. Well, that would tally up to, about 100 horsepower. And Jeff said he has a 4-bottom plow that he can hook up. We look forward to watching that action at Penfield, Illinois at the Historic Farm Days Show, also called the I&I Show, starting Thursday. This guy checks in with us every week to give us the rundown on what's selling at Big Iron Auctions. Let's go to Mark Stock.
Well, hello, Max, and happy 4th of July weekend to everybody. Our big sale coming up here on July the 6th features a lot of outstanding equipment. Mahindra USA will have 25 items, 8 tractors, folks. These tractors all have cab, air, and loaders. They're mechanical fronts. There's a Mahindra 8100, 2 Mahindra 9125s. There's a Mahindra 8090 and 2 Mahindra 9110Ps. Once again, these tractors have less than 10 hours on them and they sell with no reserve. Now we've also got P2 Leasing Inc. out of Kelowna, Illinois, selling some semi-truck tractors, 2016 International Pro Star and a 2013 Pete 386 Semi. Fair Equipment out of Hooker, Oklahoma. They have 11 John Deere Case and Isuzu power units, plus they've got a restored John Deere 4020 and a 1958 John Deere 730 tractor. USC LLC out of Sabetha, Kansas. They use BigIron.com to sell their unused stainless steel self-mover conveyors. If you're looking for a conveyor, folks, find it selling to the highest bidder on the Big Iron website. If you don't see what you're looking for, we'll have over 4,500 items selling. Choose from over 170 tractors, 28 combines, 22 different round balers. We've got 24 states selling on BigIron.com, Max, during the month of July.
The next generation of American agricultural leaders is growing up all around us, and a lot of them are in FFA. We're pleased to get to know them here on This Week in Agribusiness, and this week we're meeting Jaya Nelson. She just completed her term as Nebraska State FFA Vice President. And Jaya, what was it like serving as Vice President for a state like Nebraska?
It was awesome. Nebraska's full of great members, and we saw a lot of growth, not only in ourselves, but in our membership over the year. We grew to over 10,000 members while I was serving as a state officer and added over 203 chapters to the register here at Nebraska. So it was very exciting to be a part of that and to meet all the students and to get to learn from them.
That is fantastic. With that kind of growth, Jaya, I'm guessing convention had a lot of excitement this year.
Yes, Nebraska had a lot of excitement anyways because it was our first convention back in person. So we hosted around 9,000 people at Pinnacle Bank Arena just over 3 days. So it was a crazy whirlwind, but it was so cool to just have all that energy back in Lincoln.
Yes, to have that energy, that excitement. FFAers get so much when they come together and meet one another in person. Jaya, over this past year, I understand you had the chance to get to different schools and meet different members. What was a highlight of your year of service?
A highlight over my year was I got to meet, we traveled for EDGE conferences, so a personal development conference early on, and we met in 11 different districts, so we had 11 of those. We traveled all across. I went to Curtis for one, and I got to meet some really cool students and really connect with an individual that grew up a lot like me, and so that was really cool to make that connection and now have those friendships moving forward after my officer term.
That is fantastic. And Jaya, you're from Bassett, Nebraska. Of course, that's cattle country, and I understand you're on the rodeo team at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. What are your events?
I participate in the breakaway and team roping.
Fantastic. And you're looking to stay in agriculture as you grow older? Yes.
So currently I'm majoring in agricultural education with a minor in the entrepreneurship program here in Lincoln. But for future plans, I would like to come home and run the ranch eventually. We run about 600 cows just south of Bassett, Nebraska, and winterize over 1,000 yearlings. So we got a lot going on at home, and I'm excited to help boost those genetics and come back to the ranch eventually.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, Jaya. Thanks for your service as an FFA State Vice President.
Thank you.
Folks, it's no surprise in the world of agriculture that technology continues to advance. We're seeing changes in the way farmers plant crops, harvest crops, and manage their crops and livestock in the field. Well, Max has been working on something to highlight those changes. Max?
Yeah, Mike, we want to alert folks to a special series coming up, a special event that'll be on RFD TV starting Monday night, July 11th. It's a series sponsored by Pivot Bio called Farm Next. We'll be putting the inventors and their inventions in the spotlight. Oh, and there'll be a panel bringing agriculture, scientific, and financial expertise there to quiz these inventors sitting there at my elbow. I guess you'd call it a deep dive into ag innovation. From the technology in the field, robots in the bins, new software, hardware, crop selling platforms, these ideas have the potential to change the way farmers plant, grow, harvest, and sell their crops. The participants on this program will be in the incubator stage with their inventions. No current sales. They have only trials to validate the viability of the product, and each show will feature the journey that these inventors have been on to arrive at Farm Next, the next step in making their idea a reality. The show appeals to the folks in the Pivot Bio family because it mirrors the road that their founders took. For Pivot Bio, they saw a need, they created a solution, they started Pivot Bio, a company that is working to change the ag industry for the better. The CEO and founder, Karsten Timme, will be one of the panelists there. Viewers of Farm Next, by the way, will have the opportunity to vote for the inventions inventors that they think have the most promise. And the winning vote getter will be invited to display at this summer's Farm Progress Show at Boone, Iowa. That'll be August 30th and 31st and September 1st. These are some interesting people. And Mike, some of these folks have been knee-deep in agriculture since they were very young, and others have had very little exposure. I think the folks will enjoy it. That'll be coming up on RFD TV and a bunch of websites.
Thank you, Max. It's going to be exciting to see how that technology could change the game for farmers around the country. Tune in to Farm Next on RFD TV. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in to This Week in Agribusiness. We'll be back here next week as news continues to impact the world of agriculture. We hope we'll see you same time, same place, right here.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.